Is once again we find ourselves in sort of parallel universes. We have the universe that we had Caroline Levitt there just saying there's no classified information on this chat. This is a hoax. This is a sensationalist story. Then we look at the chat and we see that it has detailed times, the weapon systems and aircraft that are going to be used and when they're going to be used. So the timing of airstrikes on the Houthi rebels. And so how this is not classified information.
The story I mentioned a moment ago, going on in Washington, coming to us a curious sort of bubbling fever pitch. It is about a journalist, the editor of a magazine known to be for being so critical of President Trump and his administration. He found himself on it's called a Signal chat group. And to his astonishment, on that chat group, in which he was included, were plans to attack the Houthis militants in Yemen in some fine detail. He wrote about it. He was called for his pains a sleaze bag, among other things, by senior members of the administration, including the president. He's standing by his story, and now the question is who was lying and who's going to answer for it. Now, look, yesterday, the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, would not say whether she was part of that group chat, said the content of the group chat was unclassified. Gabbard then gave this reflection on what she had to say.
Yes, Ranking Member. My answer yesterday was based on my recollection, or the lack thereof, on the details that were posted there. I was not, and what was shared today reflects the fact that I was not directly involved with that part of the Signal chat, and replied at the end reflecting the effects, the very brief effects that the National Security Advisor had shared.
So it's your testimony that less than 2 weeks ago, you were on a Signal chat that had all of this information about F-18s and MQ-9 Reapers and targets on strike, and you in that 2-week period simply forgot that was there. That's your testimony?
My testimony is I did not recall the exact details of what was included there.
That was not your testimony. Your testimony was that you were not aware of anything related to weapons packages, targets, and timing.
Well, I'm not sure what you make of that. I can tell you, it does sound a little bit to me like the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, backpedaling from the entire fiasco as fast as she can possibly manage it. Now, the White House Press Secretary, Caroline Levitt, doesn't have quite that degree of latitude. She had this to say about the whole debacle.
The mainstream media continues to be focused on a sensationalized story from the failing Atlantic magazine that is falling apart by the hour. Here are the facts. The National Security Advisor has taken responsibility for this matter, and the National Security Council immediately said, alongside the White House counsel's office, that they are looking into how a reporter's number was inadvertently added to this messaging thread. We have said all along that no classified material was sent on this messaging thread. There were no locations, no sources or methods revealed, and there were certainly no war plans discussed.
So, what, as I say, are we to make of this? Well, Charlotte McDonald Gibson can help us, the Times correspondent in the United States. So it's you, Charlotte.
Oh, right. Can I help explain it? That's a lot of pressure there, Tom. Well, I think what is most striking about this is once again we find ourselves in sort of parallel universes. We have the universe that we had Caroline Levitt there just saying there's no classified information on this chat. This is a hoax. This is a sensationalist story. Then we look at the chat and we see that it has detailed times, the weapon systems and aircraft that are going to be used and when they're going to be used. So the timing of airstrikes on the Houthi rebels. And so how this is not classified information is a question that they have failed to answer. They just keep saying this isn't classified. But the question, this kept coming up at the briefing that we just had a little bit of with Caroline Levitt. People kept asking her, why isn't this classified? And she just kept saying, it's not classified. The Defense Secretary said it's not classified, therefore it's not. So I think this is the question that's come up over and over again today, and it will continue to do so as the White House keeps pushing its own angle, which is denigrating the reporter who did the story.
Well, here's my first question, and maybe you can help me with this, Charlotte. How on earth does the press secretary at the White House and the Secretary of Defense to the Trump administration, in saying that this material was not classified, it was not secret, how do they say this stuff and still keep a straight face?
Yes, I mean, they say, okay, so what was it they said exactly? Because it doesn't have locations, it doesn't count as classified. So had there been the aircraft, the time, and the location, then it would have been classified. Because there was no location, that makes it unclassified. So that's their argument. And that argument, it didn't really stand up in that press conference because she just kept refusing to answer the question. And it does seem like some Republicans are sort of saying, well, it's time to own it. Administrations can make mistakes, own it, apologize. Maybe Mike Waltz, the national security advisor who added Jeffrey Goldberg to the chat, should resign. Some Republicans are saying that, but just calling it a hoax and saying that, that isn't really a story, when everyone can see this chat, that's difficult to stand up.
Charlotte, is that actually happening now? Because the Republican side in the Senate and in the House of Representatives are pretty much famous for standing absolutely solidly behind whatever the line is that the president lays down at any particular moment. Are we now seeing some fracturing of that? Because that would put a bit of pressure on the president. I don't know if it's enough to make a change, but it would add a bit of pressure. What's your sense of it?
Well, no, I wouldn't say we're seeing a fracturing. That was really notable listening to these intelligence hearings in the Senate yesterday with Tulsi Gabbard, and there were more intelligence hearings today. But yesterday we had the Republican and Democrat members of the Intelligence Committee quizzing Tulsi Gabbard and the CIA Director John Ratcliffe, and it was very notable. You had the Democrats really going after them, and you had the Republican senators, giving them opportunity to ask questions about other things, sort of saying, well, we're really pleased that these attacks were so successful. So you didn't see that publicly. So I'd say there's just been a few Republican representatives who have said, no, it's time to own this, but it's not coming from anybody publicly within the administration at this point in time. We're not seeing any fractures within the administration. We're seeing Trump very much saying, I stand behind my national security advisor. I stand behind Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. So right now there is a show of complete unity from the administration.
Fascinating stuff. I mean, Mikey and Kate, it is a very different country, a very different political culture, very different in so many different ways. We see the similarities. We focus less on the enormous differences, and they are truly enormous. But we do know from our, in our innocence, looking at our politics here at Westminster, where we're sitting here under the little black gazebo, which is a kind of institution at Westminster. But we watch what goes on over the road, and I occasionally come down, which is fun. A minister who was involved in leaking military plans of an imminent attack, which had not yet taken place, involving a journalist. That minister, I don't care what administration there is, whenever it happens, that minister would be gone in minutes, wouldn't he?
Yeah, obviously. I mean, I feel like I should join Signal in the hope that John Healey sends me, the details of their next operation. But certainly, yes. But I mean, we know this about Donald Trump, don't we? That I suspect no head is going to roll here. I just reckon they're going to kind of double down. It would have gone by now, right? Like if they were going to do that.
I love everything about this story. One of my favourite bits about this story is, when you see a catastrophe like this and everyone's scrabbling around for, how it actually happened, you've got to look for the most obvious explanation. Now, Mike Waltz...
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah.
So Mike Waltz added Jeffrey Goldberg. Jeffrey Goldberg, in his Atlantic piece, said he put himself on Signal as JG.
Yeah.
There is someone in Donald Trump's cabinet called Jamieson Greer, who's quite low level in the cabinet, but he's a United States trade representative with a particular focus on the Suez Canal.
Okay.
So you can imagine
did you deduce that yourself?
I look, yeah, it's on the cabinet's
on
Wikipedia.
I'm telling you, I'm impressed.
But is this your theory? It's quite impressive.
I looked and I checked. So what obviously happened here is Mike Waltz found someone with JG as their name in his Signal list.
What's his name again, this guy?
Jamieson Greer.
Charlotte McDonald Gibson, before we take a break, does that sound plausible to you? I'm quite impressed.
I emailed the US Trade Representative yesterday to ask him if he was indeed the JG in question, and he did not reply. So I can neither confirm nor deny, I'm afraid.
You're on the wrong chat groups, Charlotte. And here with me on Pinar and Friends, Kate Ferguson from The Sun on Sunday, and Mikey Smith from The Mirror, and Charlotte McDonald Gibson from the United States Times correspondent, still with us on the line, which is good, because there's more I want to sort of hear from you, Charlotte. And I'm now thinking of, because we were hearing here, at Westminster, the Chancellor, talking about what an uncertain, in some ways worrying world that we're living in just at the moment. If you are a citizen of Greenland, if you're a politician in Greenland, you know all about uncertainty and being rather worried, because I don't know if it's happened yet, Charlotte, but there's going to be a delegation, a pretty powerful American delegation landing in Greenland sometime very soon, uninvited and unwanted. And they're maybe not unreasonably feeling a little bit intimidated by this, Charlotte, aren't they?
Yeah, so this transpired over the weekend. Vice President J.D. Vance's wife, Usha Vance, put out this very friendly video saying she was looking forward to visiting Greenland on Friday with one of their sons to attend a dog sledding race, which, on the surface would be pretty benign. But given that Trump has said he will, wants to take Greenland one way or another, the people in Greenland and, of course, Denmark took this in a very different way indeed, and made very clear that while she was welcome to come as a spectator to a dog sledding race, they really felt like this was quite an aggressive move. And I thought it was quite interesting that Usha Vance had chosen this as her first foreign trip, considering she's been quite low profile so far.
Yes.
So this was quite surprising in itself.
Do you think it was her idea, Charlotte, by the way? Can she possibly have come up with that herself? I think I'll pop over to Greenland for a weekend away.
I did find it all very odd because, like I said, she's kept quite a low profile and obviously a very smart woman with a very, storied career. So, she must have known. I can't imagine she just thought, I'd love to go to a dog sled race in Greenland with my son. I mean, that is inconceivable. But then to choose this as the issue that she wants to be known for, that seems kind of odd as well. So I did find it very odd. But because of all the furore over it, J.D. Vance has now, said he's going to go too. So he put out a very sort of chirpy video on social media yesterday saying, I'm really happy to look forward to accompanying my wife to Greenland on Friday. Oh, by the way, we're not going to the dog sled races anymore. So obviously the backlash has had an impact. So now he's going as well. And I believe that Mike Waltz is going too. So maybe there's another signal group that we can all get onto to find out what's happening in Greenland on Friday.
Oh, that's what you call doubling down. In fact, the Vice President's wife, the Second Lady, going to Greenland as a sort of, a demonstration that they can go where they like, including Greenland. And then the Vice President's on his way. And now the National Security are they going to be walking into a bar in Greenland, cracking their knuckles and staring at people and daring them to start something? It does sound a little bit scary from a Greenland point of view. And they're not at all happy in Greenland. Donald Trump, meanwhile, Charlotte, he just keeps on doubling and tripling down on this thing. He wants Greenland, he wants it on any way he can get it, and he means that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm imagining that sort of bar brawl, and I think the Greenlanders are a pretty tough bunch, to be fair. So, I think they'd probably be able to give some of their own back there. But yeah, I think it's first. I mean, certainly he'd mentioned this during the first administration, and everyone just sort of laughed, ho, that's just Trump saying whatever comes into his head. But there's genuine concern now in Europe because he keeps coming back to it in increasingly aggressive terms. And this visit from the vice president, this is quite an aggressive move, and they've made very clear. The Greenlanders, that they're not interested in becoming part of the United States.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it has gone from being something that's like, oh, isn't it funny that he says this, to being like, well, why does he keep pushing this?
Yeah.
What is actually going to happen? There's so much unpredictability about this administration that, that they can't not take it seriously, really.
No. How's it going down in the States? Is it registering much with the American public? I know it gets some coverage in the US media, but does the American on Main Street around America notice this stuff or care about it or think about it?
I can safely say I have not had a conversation with any of my American friends or contacts about Greenland. I mean, as it comes back to all these things, the issues that people care about is the price of eggs in the shop. It's, it's inflation, it's migration. I really have not seen much interest in the Greenland issue. I think there is a slight concern or a slight disconnect between what Trump has said about not wanting to be involved in foreign conflicts and having a sort of aggressive language about other countries. There's a sort of disconnect there that I think people have noticed. But maybe it's just that, like I said, people don't always take him seriously when he says these things. So they think, oh, that's just hot air. But, like I said, I think they are taking him seriously in Greenland and Denmark and the rest of Europe now.
Yeah, Casey?
Yeah, Charlotte, I wondered, if we do... So we were going to laugh this off, right? America will take over Greenland, whatever. But if we do need to take Donald Trump seriously because he keeps returning to it and the Vances are there, like, what on earth could he do next? Like, what would he do that could... Like, what are people thinking he's going to do next on Greenland?
Well, that's the thing. People aren't really going there, they're not really having that conversation, because it's sort of like, well, that can't happen, so it's not like anyone's saying, well, in theory this particular, the US naval vessels could, take Greenland. No one's actually gone to that point where they've really even speculated about what some sort of military invasion of Greenland would look like, because it is still at this sort of, that's, it can't really be something that he's seriously considering point. So I haven't seen those kind of discussions. I guess, maybe he's going to try and have greater influence over Greenland using trade and tariffs as one of his tools.
I think that was the
would be the obvious
suggestion.
next step, rather than sending over a fleet
right, yeah.
I think that was the suggestion, because Denmark, of course, is the presiding power over Greenland. In Greenland, there does seem to be this will for independence, and has been for a very long time. Although it's also, and it was a big issue in the recent Greenland election, just literally days ago. Although it's also said that this, the shadow of Donald Trump, has made people think a little bit about even that. The idea that if you become independent from Denmark, do you then become easier prey for Donald Trump? But I still think they want their independence, and Denmark, of course, lining up with Greenland, saying, look, it's up to Greenland, it's not up to anybody else. Mikey?
Charlotte, I was wondering, and I keep wondering, where are the Democrats? Is there, given Trump's increasingly erratic decision-making, given how close to the wire he's going with Russia, Greenland, signal chats, it never ends, and we see it over here and we're like, this is mad, what is happening? Is there any kind of organized opposition?
No, that's the big thing at the moment. The Democrats are really scrambling to work out how to respond to this. I mean, first of all, how do you respond to the sort of onslaught of these kind of policies, which are, so different to their own and so, concerning to so many American people, especially Democrats. So they're struggling to respond to the volume, and they just can't come up with who they want to be ideologically at this point as well. I mean, we've seen so many splits among some of the more prominent Democrats, like Fetterman, sort of siding with Trump on some issues, and Gavin Newsom on the trans issue, for example, that the California governor on the trans issue, sort of saying, oh well, making. Sort of implying that he agrees with some of these Trump policies on this, and then you have the more sort of progressive Democrats saying, hang on a minute, no, we need to stand up for these progressive values more than ever. So you're having these big, deep ideological splits in the Democrats, and that's preventing them from really coming up with any sort of coherent opposition. And unlike in the UK, you do not have an opposition leader. You do not have one figure which everyone can get behind, or who can try and bring those different elements together. So at the moment, the Democrats are really struggling to come up with any sort of coherent messaging to either sort of challenge him in the Senate or the House, where of course they don't have a majority, or indeed in public opinion as well, because people aren't seeing any sort of coherence from them.
It's something you see in politics in lots of places. When a party ends up in losing an election, they end up fighting each other for quite a while before they even think about doing anything much else. And that seems to be happening in some ways, Charlotte, in America with the Democrats too, doesn't it? You've got Bernie Sanders, who's kind of America's Jeremy Corbyn. He's on the stump with Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, who's a firebrand young congresswoman, and they're drawing massive crowds, calling for a much tougher approach. You got the statesmen of the Democratic Party like Chuck Schumer getting all sorts of heat for trying to tread a more delicate line. And while they're doing that, they just don't quite seem to have any kind of idea what to do about Donald Trump. Although you'd think for an opposition party, he ought to be quite a big target.
Yes, exactly. I mean, where are we seeing that opposition coming from now? We're seeing it from the courts. I think we've seen so many of those executive orders successfully challenged in the courts. And something really interesting I read the other day was that law school applications have soared since the inauguration, because everyone's like, okay, so this is the profession which really gets things done now. So people want to be lawyers suddenly again and join the legal profession, because they're seeing that there is some power there. The checks and balances are coming from the legal profession. And also, I think, the anti-Tesla movement as well. I mean, that's really gaining steam. And I was down at one of the Tesla dealerships reporting on this a couple of weeks ago, and they were all so frustrated by the Democratic Party. I mean, there's all these, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Pam Bondi, they've all implied that the Democrats are funding these anti-Tesla Tesla protests, which, the people there are saying, we kind of wish they would, we wish they'd give us some money because they're not doing anything. They're completely useless. So that's why we're out here, more of us every week, on the streets, honking outside Tesla dealerships. So at the same time as the courts are doing something, you are seeing more sort of protest action that is growing. But the Democrats have at this point not really tapped into either of those streams to really come up with any sort of argument or coherence themselves.
All right, Charlotte McDonald Gibson, always great to talk to you, Charlotte. Do come back and join us again very soon. I mean, Kate and Mikey, the shadow of Donald Trump, it is a long, long shadow, isn't it? I mean, so much of what we were talking about here today with the Chancellor's statement and hearing from Rachel Reeves had to do with, the uncertainties which can't quite be planned for or prepared for. And one of the biggest uncertainties, the biggest shadow, the biggest cloud is Donald Trump. Next week, he's going to do what he says is his Liberation Day, which is when he starts whacking tariffs here and there and who knows where else. And if we're on the wrong side of that, if we're in the line of fire, well, look out, because that's what we're going to be talking about on this show, and not just on this show, I suspect, all over Westminster and so many, many other places. I mean, that's all we've got time for tonight. Mikey and Kate, thank you so much for joining us. Lovely to have you with us.